My wife told me to choose between her and my dying father, so I chose my father. Then I found out why she really wanted me gone that weekend, and everything I thought I knew about my marriage turned out to be a lie. The revenge I got was so perfect I still can't believe it actually happened. I'm writing this from my childhood home where I've been staying for the past 2 months helping care for my dad who has late-stage heart failure. My name is Michael. I'm 35 years old, and until recently I thought I had a pretty solid marriage to my wife Jessica, who is 32. We'd been together for 7 years, married for 5, and I genuinely believed we were building something real. We had a nice house in the suburbs, 2 cars, good jobs, the whole picture perfect setup that everyone talks about wanting. I worked as an engineer at a manufacturing company making decent money, and Jessica worked in human resources at a tech startup downtown. We didn't have kids yet, but we talked about it sometimes, always saying we'd start trying in a year or 2 once we were more settled. Looking back now, I realize that conversation never actually went anywhere. She always found a reason to push it off. But at the time, I just thought we were being practical and responsible about our future. Everything started falling apart about 3 months ago when my dad had a major cardiac episode and ended up in the hospital for 2 weeks. The doctors were very clear with my mom and me that his condition was terminal, that we were looking at months not years, and that he would need around-the-clock care as his health declined. My mom is 68 and has arthritis in both knees, so she physically couldn't handle all the lifting and helping him move around that he would need. My sister lives in Australia with her family and couldn't just pack up and move back to help. That left me. I'm an only son. My dad worked 3 jobs to put me through college. He taught me how to be a man, how to treat people with respect, how to work hard and keep your word. The idea of him spending his final months in some sterile nursing facility where he'd be just another patient was completely unacceptable to me. So I made the decision that I would split my time between our house and my parents' house, spending weekends there to give my mom a break and help with the heavy lifting and medical appointments. Jessica's reaction when I told her was not what I expected. At first, she seemed understanding, said all the right things about family coming first and how sorry she was about my dad's condition. But then when I explained that I'd be gone every weekend, sometimes Friday night through Monday morning, her whole demeanor changed. She got this look on her face that I'd never seen before, something between anger and panic, and she started asking all these questions about whether that was really necessary and couldn't we hire a nurse, and why did it have to be me specifically. I explained the financial reality, that my parents didn't have the money for full-time nursing care and their insurance wouldn't cover it, and that honestly, even if they could afford it, I wanted to be there for my dad. I wanted him to spend his final time on Earth surrounded by people who loved him, not strangers who were just doing a job. She went quiet after that, just nodded and said okay fine, but I could tell she wasn't happy about it. Over the next few weeks her attitude got progressively worse. She started making comments about how I was never home anymore, how she felt like a single woman living alone, how this wasn't what she signed up for when she got married. The argument started about a month into the new arrangement. I'd come home Monday morning exhausted from a weekend of helping my dad in and out of bed, managing his medications, helping him to the bathroom, cooking meals, and just sitting with him watching his favorite old Western movies. I'd walk in the door and instead of asking how my dad was doing or how I was holding up, Jessica would immediately start complaining. The house was a mess even though she'd been there alone all weekend. There was no food in the fridge even though she was perfectly capable of going to the grocery store. She was bored and lonely and felt neglected. Every single thing was about her and her needs and her feelings, and not once did she ask about my dad's pain levels or whether the new medication was helping or how my mom was coping. It was like my family's crisis was just this annoying inconvenience that was disrupting her comfortable life. I tried to be patient, tried to explain that this was temporary, that we were in crisis mode and I needed her support. She'd say she understood, but then 2 days later we'd have the same fight all over again. Then came the weekend that changed everything. It was a Friday afternoon and I was packing my bag to head to my parents' house like I did every week. My dad had been having a particularly rough week with increased pain and breathing difficulties, and my mom had called me in tears the night before saying she didn't know how much longer she could handle seeing him suffer. I was stressed and sad and running on about 4 hours of sleep. Jessica came into the bedroom where I was packing and just stood there with her arms crossed. "We need to talk," she said. I kept folding clothes and told her we could talk, but I needed to leave in about 20 minutes. She took a deep breath and then she just said it. "I don't want you to go this weekend. I need you here." I actually laughed because I thought she was joking. When I realized she was serious, I stopped packing and looked at her. "Jessica," I said, "my dad is dying. You know I have to go." She shook her head and her voice got louder. "No," she said, "you don't have to go. You choose to go. There's a difference. You choose your parents over me every single weekend, and I'm sick of it. I'm your wife. I should come first." I felt my chest get tight and this wave of disbelief wash over me. I tried to stay calm, and I explained again that this was about my father's final months on Earth, that this wasn't about choosing anyone over anyone. This was about being there for family during a crisis. But she wasn't hearing it. She kept pushing, saying I was abandoning her, saying marriage means putting your spouse first always, saying her needs mattered too. Then she hit me with the ultimatum that would end up being the biggest mistake of her life. "If you leave this weekend," she said, "I'm done. I'm serious, Michael. You walk out that door and choose your dying father over me, and we're finished. The marriage is over. I'll start packing my things and you can come home Monday to an empty house." I just stared at her, trying to process what I was hearing. She was actually asking me to abandon my dying father so I could stay home and do what exactly? Watch Netflix with her? I felt something crack inside my chest, something that had been holding together the image I had of who she was and what our marriage meant. "Okay," I said quietly. "If that's how you feel, if you genuinely think asking me to choose between you and my dying father is reasonable, then you're right. We're done." Her face went completely white and she started backtracking immediately. "Wait," she said, "I didn't mean like right now, I just meant we need to talk about boundaries." But I was already zipping up my bag. "No, Jessica," I said, "you made yourself very clear. You want me to prove you come first by abandoning my father when he needs me most. That's not a boundary, that's cruelty, and it tells me everything I need to know about who you really are. I'm going to my parents' house. When I come back Monday, we can figure out the logistics of separating." She started crying then, saying she didn't mean it, saying I was overreacting, but I just walked past her and out the door. As I drove to my parents' house, I felt this strange mix of grief and relief. Grief for my marriage ending, but relief that I finally saw her true colors before wasting any more years with someone who could be that selfish. But here's where the story takes a turn that I absolutely did not see coming. I spent the weekend helping my dad, and honestly, having made the decision to end things with Jessica gave me this weird clarity and peace. My dad could tell something was wrong, and I eventually told him what happened. He just shook his head and said, "Son, a woman who asks you to choose between her and your dying parent isn't a woman worth keeping." He was right. Sunday night, my mom was in the kitchen making dinner, and I was sitting with my dad in the living room when my phone started absolutely blowing up with notifications. Text messages, missed calls, voicemails, all from numbers I didn't recognize. I opened the first text and my stomach dropped. It was from Jessica's coworker Amanda, who I'd met a few times at company events. The message said, "Michael, I'm so sorry to be the one to tell you this, but you need to know what's been going on. Jessica has been having an affair with your neighbor Derek for the past 6 months. This weekend, while you're gone, they've been at your house together. Multiple people have seen his truck in your driveway all weekend. I'm sorry, you deserve better." I read the message 3 times trying to make sense of it. Derek was our next-door neighbor, a divorced guy in his early 40s who worked from home doing something with investment banking. Jessica and I had been friendly with him in a casual, neighborly way. He'd come over for barbecues a few times. We'd chat if we saw each other getting mail. Nothing that would have ever made me suspicious. But as I sat there holding my phone, suddenly all these little moments from the past 6 months started clicking into place like puzzle pieces. The way Jessica had been so insistent I go to my parents' house every weekend, and specifically that I leave Friday night instead of Saturday morning. The way she'd been dressing nicer on weekends, doing her hair and makeup even though she claimed she was just staying home alone. The way she'd changed the garage door code a few months back, claiming the old one was compromised. The way she'd suddenly wanted to start parking her car in the garage instead of the driveway. She'd been clearing the way for him to come over without the neighbors seeing his truck next to hers. My phone kept buzzing with more messages. Another coworker had sent photos. There was Derek's distinctive black pickup truck parked in my driveway at 9 o'clock Friday night. Another photo from Saturday morning showing the truck still there. Another from Saturday afternoon. These weren't just visits. He'd spent the night in my house, in my bed with my wife. I felt physically sick. Then I got a message from my own buddy Travis, who lived 2 streets over. Dude, I drove by your place this morning to drop off that drill I borrowed and I saw Jessica and some guy on your front porch. They were all over each other. I took a picture because I figured you'd want proof. I didn't know if you knew or not, but man, I'm sorry. The photo showed Jessica in her bathrobe with Derek's arms around her waist, both of them laughing. This wasn't just an affair. This was her playing house with another man the second I left every weekend. I showed the messages to my parents and my mom actually gasped out loud. My dad just closed his eyes and said some very colorful words about Jessica's character that I won't repeat here. I felt this cold rage building in my chest, not the hot explosive kind, but the calculating methodical kind. Jessica hadn't just been unsupportive during my family crisis. She'd been actively using my father's terminal illness as an opportunity to spend uninterrupted time with her affair partner. Every weekend, I'd been helping my dad to the bathroom and managing his medication and watching him struggle to breathe. She'd been screwing the neighbor in our bed. The sheer sociopathic level of betrayal was almost impossible to process. And that ultimatum she'd given me, that demand I choose between her and my dying father, suddenly made perfect sense. She hadn't been feeling neglected. She'd been annoyed that my presence on weekends was cramping her affair. She wanted me gone so she could be with Derek without having to sneak around. I spent Sunday night making a plan, and let me tell you, the rage gave me focus. First thing Monday morning, instead of going home, I called my lawyer. I'd used him for some real estate stuff when we bought the house, and I knew he handled divorce cases. I sent him all the screenshots and photos and gave him the full rundown. He told me to come straight to his office, do not go home, do not confront Jessica yet. I drove straight there, and we spent 3 hours going through everything. The house was in both our names, but I'd put down the entire down payment from my inheritance when my grandmother died, and I'd been paying 70% of the mortgage because I made more money. We had joint bank accounts, joint credit cards, the whole financial entanglement. My lawyer advised me that with proof of adultery, I had significant leverage, and he started drawing up papers immediately. He also told me to document everything, get statements from the neighbors who'd seen Derek's truck, get copies of any communications, build an airtight case. Next, I called a locksmith and had him meet me at the house at 2 o'clock Monday afternoon when I knew Jessica would be at work. I had every lock changed on every door. Then I called the garage door company and had them come reset the code to something only I knew. I went through the house methodically and gathered every single item that was purely hers, her clothes, her shoes, her makeup, her decorative items she'd bought, everything. I packed it all into boxes and trash bags, probably 30 bags total, and I stacked them neatly in the garage. Then I went through our joint bank accounts and transferred exactly half into a new account in just my name. I took screenshots of every transaction from the past 6 months showing how our money was being spent, and I noticed something interesting. There were multiple charges to restaurants and hotels on days I'd been at my parents' house. She'd been using our joint money to finance her affair. I documented all of it. By 4 o'clock, everything was ready, and I sat down in the living room to wait. Jessica got home at 5:30 like always. I heard her car pull into the driveway, and then a few minutes later I heard her key in the lock. It didn't work, obviously. She tried again, then I heard her confused voice calling my name from outside. I walked to the door and opened it. She was standing there looking annoyed. "Why doesn't my key work?" she asked. I just looked at her and said, "Because you don't live here anymore." Her face went through about 5 different expressions in 2 seconds. "What are you talking about?" she said. "Michael, this isn't funny, let me in." I stepped outside onto the porch and closed the door behind me. I pulled out my phone and started showing her the photos. Her with Derek on our porch. His truck in our driveway all weekend. Her face went from confused to pale to bright red. "Where did you get those?" she stammered. "Who's been spying on me?" "Multiple neighbors," I said calmly, "and your own coworkers who were disgusted enough by your behavior to reach out to me." "So let me be very clear, Jessica. You've been having an affair with Derek for at least 6 months based on what people have told me. You've been using my father's terminal illness and the weekends I spent caring for him as an opportunity to have your affair partner stay in our home, sleep in our bed. You've been spending our joint money on hotels and dinners with him. And then you had the audacity to give me an ultimatum demanding I choose between you and my dying father, not because you felt neglected, but because you wanted me gone so you could be with him without interruption." She tried to deny it at first, tried to claim the photos were taken out of context, that Derek had just stopped by to help her with something. But I kept showing her more evidence until she finally just deflated and started crying. "It wasn't supposed to happen," she sobbed. "It just happened. We connected, and I was lonely, and you were never here." I actually laughed at that. "I was never here because I was taking care of my dying father," I said. "Something you should have been supporting me through as my wife. Instead, you used his final months as an opportunity to cheat." "That's sociopathic, Jessica." She reached for me and I stepped back. "Don't touch me," I said. "Your belongings are packed in the garage. My lawyer will be serving you with divorce papers within 48 hours. In them you'll find that because of your adultery and because I paid the down payment on this house and have been paying the majority of the mortgage, I'm seeking primary ownership of the house with me buying out your minimal equity. You'll also see that I'm seeking return of half of all money you spent on your affair since those were joint funds used for purposes that didn't benefit the marriage." She started screaming then about how I couldn't do this, how she had rights, how I was being vindictive. I just pulled out my phone and started recording. "Say that again," I said. "Tell me again how I'm the bad guy here while my father is dying and you've been screwing the neighbor." She shut up immediately and just stared at me with pure hatred in her eyes. This is who she really was underneath everything. Not the woman I'd married who seemed kind and supportive, but this selfish, entitled person who saw other people, including her own husband, as just props in her life story. I told her she had 30 minutes to load her belongings into her car and leave. If she wasn't gone in 30 minutes, I'd call the police and report her for trespassing, since the house was in my name primarily, and she no longer had legal access with the locks changed. She called me every name in the book, but she started loading bags into her car. The whole time she was crying and screaming about how everyone makes mistakes and I was ruining her life over one mistake, and why couldn't I forgive her? I just stood there silent, watching her load bag after bag. When she finally finished and got in her car, she rolled down the window for one last parting shot. "You'll regret this," she said. "You're going to end up alone and miserable, and you'll realize what you threw away." I leaned down and looked her right in the eye. "Jessica," I said, "my father is dying. I'm spending his final weeks helping him and being there for my mother. I have perspective you clearly lack. Losing you isn't a loss, it's removing a tumor. Drive safe." She peeled out of the driveway and I watched her go. Then I went inside, locked the door, and sat down in the quiet, empty house. I waited for the sadness to hit, the grief over my marriage ending, but it never came. All I felt was relief. I called my parents and told them what happened. My mom cried, but said she was proud of me for standing up for myself. My dad said Jessica never deserved me and good riddance. Then I did something I probably shouldn't have, but I was running on pure spite at this point. I walked next door to Derek's house and knocked on his door. He answered looking casual and relaxed. "Hey Michael," he said with this friendly smile like we were still buddies. "What's up, man?" "I just wanted to let you know," I said, matching his casual tone, "that my wife and I are getting divorced because she's been having an affair. With you." His face went completely white. I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered. "I've got photos of your truck in my driveway all weekend, every weekend for months," I said. "I've got neighbor testimony. I've got everything I need. Now I'm not going to do anything to you legally, because unfortunately being a home wrecker isn't a crime. But I did want you to know that the entire neighborhood knows what you did. My lawyer is sending letters to the HOA and to everyone on our street informing them of the situation, since we take community values seriously in this neighborhood. Enjoy being known as the guy who sleeps with his neighbors' wives." His jaw dropped and he tried to say something, but I just turned and walked away. Within a week, the entire neighborhood knew. Derek's house went up for sale 2 weeks later. Apparently, the social stigma of everyone knowing he was an affair partner was too much for him, and he couldn't handle being glared at every time he got his mail. Jessica ended up moving in with her mother an hour away because she couldn't afford to rent a place on her own, and apparently Derek wanted nothing to do with her once the affair was exposed. Turns out when you remove the excitement and secrecy and taboo nature of an affair, there's usually nothing of substance underneath. They weren't in love, they were just two selfish people getting their needs met at everyone else's expense. The divorce was finalized 4 months later. My lawyer was an absolute shark, and because we had documented proof of adultery and misuse of marital funds, I got the house with minimal buyout of her equity. She had to pay back half of what she'd spent on hotels and dinners with Derek, which came to about $4,000. She tried to fight it, but her lawyer told her she didn't have a leg to stand on, and she'd only rack up more legal fees if she pushed it. I also got to keep all the furniture and household items since I'd purchased most of it anyway. She walked away with basically just her personal belongings, a small check for her portion of equity, and a massive amount of debt from her legal fees and the money she owed me. My dad passed away 6 weeks after Jessica moved out. I was there holding his hand with my mom and sister on the other side. In his final days, he told me he was proud of the man I'd become, and that standing up for myself and removing toxic people from my life was one of the most important things a man can do. He said my future would be brighter without Jessica in it, and I should never settle for someone who doesn't respect me and my family. His final words to me were, "Live well, son. That's the best revenge." He was right. I spent the next few months grieving my dad properly without the distraction of a toxic marriage. My mom moved in with me temporarily because she couldn't handle being in their house alone yet, and having her there was actually really healing for both of us. We cooked together, watched movies, talked about dad, cried together, laughed together. It was the time we needed to process everything. About 8 months after the divorce was final, I got a text from an unknown number. It was Jessica. She'd had to get a new phone because she couldn't afford her old plan. The message was long and rambling, full of apologies and explanations about how she'd made a terrible mistake and she'd been in therapy and realized she'd been dealing with unprocessed childhood trauma that made her sabotage good things in her life. She said she understood if I couldn't forgive her, but she wanted me to know she was sorry, and she hoped maybe someday we could at least be friends. I read it twice, and then I blocked the number without responding. Some people think that makes me cruel, that everyone deserves forgiveness and a second chance. But here's what I learned through all of this. Forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. I can forgive her for my own peace and still want absolutely nothing to do with her. She made her choices, and those choices showed me exactly who she is at her core. When things got hard, when my family needed me, when I needed a partner to support me through grief, she not only failed to show up, but actively betrayed me in the worst possible way. That's not a mistake, that's character. My life now is quiet and peaceful in a way it never was when Jessica was in it. I still live in the same house, but I've redecorated and made it entirely mine. My mom moved back to her place after about 6 months, but we have dinner together twice a week. My sister visits from Australia once a year and stays with me. I've started dating again casually, nothing serious yet, but I'm in no rush. I've learned to be content alone, to enjoy my own company, to build a life that makes me happy without needing someone else to complete it. When I do eventually meet someone, I'll know exactly what red flags to watch for and exactly what I will and won't tolerate. I heard through mutual friends that Jessica is working 2 jobs trying to pay off her debt and still living with her mother. Derek apparently moved to a different state and hasn't contacted her since everything blew up. She posts on social media occasionally about self-love and growth and finding yourself, all the cliché phrases people use when their life has fallen apart due to their own choices. Sometimes people ask me if I regret how I handled things, if I think I was too harsh or moved too fast. The answer is absolutely not. She showed me who she really was, and I believed her. She chose to have an affair. She chose to use my father's terminal illness as cover for that affair. She chose to give me an ultimatum designed to manipulate me, and she chose to be cruel and selfish when I needed support. Those were all her choices, and they all had consequences. I simply stopped protecting her from those consequences. The best revenge really is living well, and I'm living better than I ever did when I was trying to make a marriage work with someone who saw me as an obligation instead of a partner. My dad was right in his final words to me. I'm living well, and that's worth more than any elaborate revenge scheme could ever be. I'm finally free, I'm finally at peace, and that's enough.